and you're listening to Tailspin, a program where we just like to hang out and tell stories. Today's show is about making connections. First, we have Stan DeWitt with his story, Finding Ellen.
In 2013, I celebrated my 50th birthday. 2013 was also the 50th anniversary of the day that I was adopted. I was adopted by Betty Joan and Jack DeWitt on November 22nd, 1963. You may remember that something else happened on November 22nd, 1963. That was the day that John F. Kennedy was assassinated. My parents had quite the day that day, and I think my mother always wanted me to somehow fulfill JFK's legacy. I'm still working on it. In 2008, my mother passed away. My dad had passed away quite a few years earlier. And my girlfriend and I at the time decided that we were going to take my mother's ashes back to Colorado. I was born in Denver, and the years that she spent in Denver were the happiest in her life. So it seemed to make sense to take her back there. So my girlfriend and I packed her ashes and put her and us on a plane and flew to Denver. While we were there, before we went up to the Rocky Mountains to scatter her ashes, we decided to go visit the Denver County Courthouse. And I felt it was time to go see whatever I could find out about my birth mother and my birth parents. Now, Colorado has some of the strictest privacy laws regarding adoptions anywhere in the country at that point. The only way to get any information was to either spend a lot of money on an attorney who can do some research, or put your name on a registry list and hope that your mother or father come looking for you. And I had done the second thing, but I didn't have enough money to go looking for an attorney. But I thought I'd file the paperwork with the state to see what would happen. So I turned in the paperwork. I think it was about $1.50. Speaking of money, by the way, the adoption paperwork that I do have from my adoption has a couple bits of information that's kind of interesting. One of them is that the adoption cost my adoption parents $10. It cost them $10. Apparently adoption was fairly cheap back then. So I was a $10 baby. So the file of paperwork cost $1.50. So I filed the paperwork. We scattered my mom's ashes. We flew back home. When I got home, I got an email from a woman who runs the registry of adoptees in Colorado, and she told me that the Colorado State Legislature had just passed a law saying anybody born before 1967 could get their original birth certificate. The cost of that was $35 to get the original birth certificate. I think that's inflation. $10 for being adopted, $35 to get your birth certificate and find out who your parents are. I spent the $35 and waited. And a couple weeks later, I got a letter in the mail, and it had my original birth certificate. And my original birth certificate had those two names on it that I'd always wondered about. My father, Paul Tovick. My mother, Ellen Brooks. One of the other pieces of information I had about my adoption was that my name at adoption was Baby Boy Brooks. So I knew the part about her was right. So I looked around, and when I looked up Paul Tovick, there was nothing. I couldn't find Paul Tovick anywhere in the United States. When I looked up Ellen Brooks, I found a million hits. It's a very common name. So I thought about it, and somebody had told me about Ancestry.com. I decided to sign up for the free trial. I figured if I can't find my mother in 14 days, I'm never going to find her, so I'll just cancel the subscription and I won't have to pay anything. So I signed up, and within an hour, I had found something. I had found a marriage record for an Ellen Green, née Ellen Brooks, in Casper, Wyoming. It had an address and it had a phone number. So I decided to do something about it. I talked with my girlfriend at the time and said, I needed advice. What do I do? Her recommendation was that I write a letter. The more I thought about it, though, the more I realized that if I didn't do anything that night, I could never forgive myself if something had happened. So I decided to call. So I picked up the phone and dialed the number, and I got an answering machine. Now, when you figure out all the scenarios about what it's going to be like when you find your birth parents, you never really think about the possibility that they're not home because they're out to dinner at Denny's. And I didn't really want to leave a message. You know, that really wouldn't be very cool. Hi, it's your son. Call me back. So I hung up. Called again an hour later. Got the message again. Hung up. It was getting a little late. It was about 7:30 California time. I knew it was 8:30 there, and I didn't want to call past 9. Looking back on that now, that was kind of silly. Like, I didn't want to bother her. So I decided to call one more time. Woman answered the phone. I said, I'm looking for Ellen Green. She said, I'm Ellen Green. I said, I'm looking for an Ellen Green who used to be Ellen Brooks. She said, I used to be Ellen Brooks. Now, everything she said so far, I already knew. I'd gotten all that information from Ancestry.com. But then I asked, I'm looking for an Ellen Green, Ellen Brooks, who used to live in Denver, Colorado. She said, I used to live in Denver, Colorado, but that was many years ago. At that moment, I knew that I was talking to my mother. So then I asked the hard question. Did you ever give up a son for adoption? She paused, then said, yes. Are you him? And I said, yes. And the next thing she asked me was, are you happy? And I said, yes. We've been connected ever since. It was a new beginning for me. I now have the mother I never had, just after I had grieved the mother that I had ever known. Shortly after that, my girlfriend and I, now my wife, took a trip to Wyoming. I'm a singer-songwriter, and I've always poured myself into my songs and my writing. When I play my songs for my adopted mother, she never really got it. She would say things like, I don't know where the music comes from. Can you explain it to me? And it used to frustrate me because I couldn't explain it. But when I sent my CDs for the first time to my birth mother, she sent me back an email that said, it's clear you have a heart that's been broken, but it is healed the stronger for it. And I knew at that moment, this was my birth mother. She understood me. That trip to Wyoming in 2013, after my 50th birthday, she arranged for a bunch of her friends to fill a coffee house in Casper, Wyoming, and I played my songs for her and her friends. I sang for my mother for the very first time.
Long time ago when the world was young and your eyes were open wide, jumped on a train and headed east across the Great Divide. Out beyond the mighty Mo and old Sault Ste. Marie, you only stop to dream a while till you reach the great blue sea, all alone. You wanted to be, you wanted to be alone. You wanted to be away. You wanted to see the world with your own two eyes. Took a ship across the ocean where you met a girl named Eve. Left her in an Irish port, her tears still on your sleeve. Don Juan, you wanted to be. Flew down to the Serengeti, ate hummingbirds and rice. Swam with the crocs in the Suez locks, deep clear Egyptian skies. So brave. You wanted to be. You wanted to be so brave. You wanted to be Don Juan. You wanted to see the world with your own two eyes. The world was big and full of empty promises and lies. Tried it on, but it felt so wrong, it didn't come in another size. The great big hole inside your heart won't disappear for long. Come back home to another life and be what you wanted to be all along. Came back home to another world, but you were still the same. Nothing's changed in the wind and the rain except your own true name. You are what you wanted to be. You are what you wanted to be.
When I think about being connected, I think about a conversation I had with my daughter a couple years ago. She was 6 years old, and she was riding in the back seat of my car coloring. And she said, "Mom, I want to make a YouTube video about how to color to get your temper back." And I said, "Well, how did you lose your temper?" And she said, "Yesterday, when the grown-ups were all talking and all the kids were over, I just didn't feel connected." I thought, how cool that she has that vocabulary, and how if we could all be a little more honest with each other about when we feel disconnected, things might be a little easier. That's the reason I really like this next story by Gregory Moore. It's about just being open, and taking that risk, and being quiet long enough to listen.
I met a girl. It's not what you might think. I had just decided against getting sushi and was setting up shop at my favorite little Italian cafe for a working dinner when this impossibly cute little girl of maybe 7 entered after wrestling with the heavy glass door. She approached the front counter and asked the owner for some paper, but all he had handy were receipt strips. After watching her leave empty-handed, I took my notebook out of my computer bag and found her outside seated next to 3 adults. "I have some paper if you want," I said. She gazed up at me with big eyes and a shy smile. "I want only 2. I ripped out 2 sheets and handed them to her. "That is